Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates, American farmers were promised help as the trade war with China hurt them badly.
So we will ensure that our farmers get the relief they need, and very, very quickly.
But a company run by these two Brazilian brothers, both with criminal records back home, got some $60 million plus of the money meant for American farmers.
I believe that taxpayers need to know how their money's being expended.
Plus, he was once the top prosecutor going after the mafia, known as America's mayor. But now Rudolph Giuliani is under criminal investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York that he once ran.
The whistleblower falsely alleges that I was operating on my own. Well, I wasn't operating on my own.
And our shout-out. As the sex abuse scandal at USA Swimming widens, with a new trial underway this week, the reporter who first broke the story, even as USA Swimming officials and some of his own readers said there was no story.
A newspaper has a responsibility to its readers to sometimes tell them what they don't want to hear.
From the Law and Crime Network studios in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening and welcome. Tonight, the story of $62 million in U.S. taxpayers' money that was meant to help American farmers, but went instead to a company owned by two Brazilian brothers with a criminal past for bribery and corruption in their home country. Two U.S. senators are now asking for a federal investigation into the brothers and their company called JBS, which, even though you may never have heard of it, is now a major player in American agriculture, owner of some very recognizable brands. From its highly produced corporate promotional videos, the JBS company appears to be a great success, built on hard work and a commitment to corporate responsibility. Started decades ago by a small-time butcher in Brazil, it has now grown into a multi-billion-dollar worldwide beef, poultry, and pork producer, the largest in the world, saying it provides the world with quality food. And it has now bought up some of America's best-known brands, Swift, Smithfield, and Pilgrim's Pride. But what the company's videos don't mention is the scandal-plagued background, big news in Brazil, of the two brothers who run the company, Josley and Wesley Batista, sons of the founder, connected to a massive bribery scheme in Brazil that allegedly helped them get the money to buy up the American companies. Brazilian TV showing hidden camera footage of the brothers supposedly making backroom deals. Joe Maxwell is the executive director of a trade group that represents American farmers and ranchers, Organization for Competitive Markets.
There was a lot of illicit behavior, bribing of 1,800 politicians in order to bolster a loan through the Brazilian government so they could enter the U.S. markets. And they have continually been a corrupt organization demonstrating corrupt practices from top to bottom. They also were caught bribing inspectors to allow rotten meat to be sprayed down with various chemicals in order to market those back into the U.S.
Now in Washington, a bipartisan move for a full federal investigation of the two brothers and the company's acquisition of U.S. food companies. In a letter to the Secretary of the Treasury, Republican Senator Marco Rubio and Democratic Senator Robert Menendez say, "We are troubled that JBS SA used the ill-gotten financing to acquire American companies." And the senators also question the group's business relationship with the Maduro regime in Venezuela, asking for a review of the company, quote, to assess the implications for security and safety of America's food supply, unquote. Questions about the company came into a sharper focus when it was revealed the company had received tens of millions of dollars in U.S. taxpayer money that President Trump said was meant to help American farmers hit hard by the trade war with China.
So we will ensure that our farmers get the relief they need, and very, very quickly. It's a good time to be a farmer. We're going to make sure of that.
But when some $60 million went to the company, it made headlines and provoked outrage over the brothers.
They are
criminals living in Brazil who own massive agricultural companies in the United States.
We're looking at 62 million plus that is going to two very corrupt brothers who have admitted manipulating the markets, who have admitted that they have bribed federal food inspectors and government officials.
In a statement to Brian Ross Investigates, the company said it has, quote, fully cooperated with all relevant authorities in a transparent manner regarding past events, unquote. And it says it is an important American employer, providing more than 60,000 jobs and partnering with more than 11,000 farmers, ranchers, and poultry producers. But its critics say that doesn't change the facts of its illicit behavior. So you're saying this is a corrupt company, and these are the fruits of a poison tree, really?
These are the fruits of a poison tree. That's exactly right, Ryan. And no one should be able to profit from ill-gotten gain. Not in the United States. You may get away with that in Brazil or in other countries, but you should not get away with that in the United States. Farmers and ranchers are being harmed, consumers are being deceived, and it's all been brought about because of the illegal activity that was conducted in Brazil. We applaud Senator Rubio's for his courage to stand up against the largest meat company in the world and call for an investigation.
A company spokesperson told us that the two brothers, under the terms of their plea deal with the Brazilian government, have relinquished their executive roles at the company and now have no involvement in the running of the business. But the spokesperson did not address our questions about whether the money used to buy up the American companies was a result of the bribery scheme, as the two senators allege. Next, after a break, Rudolph Giuliani, the man who was once the fearless prosecutor going after the mafia and wrongdoers on Wall Street, now under investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York that he used to run. We turn now to Rudolph Giuliani, the former fearless prosecutor, dynamic New York City mayor, now President Trump's lawyer, and news that he is under federal criminal investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office here in New York that he once ran and where he made his name that catapulted him to his political career, which even included a brief run for president. This week in Washington, more testimony from former and current State Department officials about Giuliani's role trying to dig up dirt in Ukraine on former Vice President Biden and his son Hunter, and his role working on behalf of at least 3 different individuals under criminal investigation, with allegations now that Giuliani tried to get the Trump administration to go easy on them. It's quite a dramatic fall from grace for the former prosecutor, the man who led New York City in those dark days after 9/11.
All that we know right now is that 2 airplanes struck the 2 large towers of the World Trade Center. We spoke to the White House. There also apparently was an attack on the Pentagon. We asked that the airspace around the city of New York be sealed by military aircraft. We've been informed that it has been, and we've seen military aircraft up in the air.
People tonight should say a prayer for the people that we've lost, and be grateful that we're all here. And tomorrow, New York is going to be here, and we're going to rebuild, and we're going to be stronger than we were before.
And joining us now to better understand what is happening with Rudolph Giuliani, 2 seasoned lawyers, John Moscow, a former prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and trial lawyer Catherine Smith. John, let me start with you. What's going on with Giuliani? This is his last hurrah?
I don't know what's going on with him. I watched what the reports are. I see that he is taking positions that are inconsistent with what many of us view the law to be. And I know that he is dynamic and aggressive and very much over the top, which may be a good thing if you're on the right side of the law, but can be very troublesome if you're not.
Catherine Smith, let me ask you, the role of a lawyer, he's president's lawyer, he's also representing individuals seeking help from the president for them. Is that a conflict?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that there's inherent problems with the way he's dealing with this that not only create conflicts as an attorney, but he's digging himself in deeper with his own legal problems. It's very troubling.
And as you know, he said he doesn't need a lawyer because he's done nothing wrong. Is that, as lawyers, what do you say to that?
He's in error. Small town in Indiana.
Yeah, all right.
I think there's a saying, only a fool is a lawyer for himself, or something similar like that.
Yeah, well, that was President Lincoln's line, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, let me play for you one more Mr. Giuliani's more confusing answers about all of this when he appeared on Chris Cuomo's program on CNN, where he first denied and then admitted his role in asking Ukrainians to investigate the former vice president.
You never asked anything about Hunter Biden. You never asked anything about Joe Biden.
The only thing I asked about
prosecutor.
Joe Biden is to get to the bottom of how it was that Lutsenko, who was appointed, dismissed the case against Antak.
So you did ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?
Of course I did.
You just said you didn't.
No, I didn't ask him to look into Joe Biden. I asked him to look into the allegations that related to my client, which tangentially involved Joe Biden in a massive bribery scheme,
Rudy,
not unlike what he did in China.
Rudy,
you explain to me how the kid got $1.5 billion
Rudy,
from China.
I have no
when
problem
Joe
with
Biden
you launching allegations, but just be careful about what you say. I asked you, did you ask Ukraine to look at Joe Biden? You said no. Then you went on to say that you did.
John Moscow, you know Giuliani. You were serving in Robert Morgenthal's office when he was the mayor. Here's a man who was articulate, had control of the facts. He was very powerful. Here, he looks like he's losing it.
Look, I first heard of Rudy when Ford was president and he was working with Ed Levy and Ace Tyler in the Department of Justice. He then became U.S. Attorney in the Southern District, and he was going gangbusters against people he perceived to be doing wrong. He did quite well against the organized crime groups, did less well against the brokers in Wall Street, where his conduct was over the top. But one had the feeling that he was motivated by an interest in doing the right thing. That seems to have gone. He seems to be using the same techniques without any inquiry into whether the facts are true or whether what he is doing is correct or right. I don't know, for example, how he can be working to represent a money dealer whose freedom is important to Erdogan and giving him advice to the people in the Oval Office about the same subject. It seems to me that that's over the top. You can't be doing both, right? Donald Trump is a person. The president representing the presidency is a person. And the fact is that Donald Trump is both, but he has different legal interests. And Rudy is doing his best to get them confused because he is representing the person, Donald Trump. Therefore, he can cause the removal of ambassadors, changing of policy, and so on. That's just plain wrong. He isn't supposed to be on that battlefield.
Catherine Smith, is it that clear, you think? Are the legal ethics rules so clear on this?
I do. And I also think there's this other step of how he's conducting himself in a seemingly cavalier manner. And that's what I find to be troubling. It seems so apparent to me that there's this conflict, and also then just, I mean, essentially calling himself out as being inconsistent in such a public forum is odd.
A question from our control room from executive producer Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda, what's your question?
Well, how much trouble could Rudy Giuliani actually be facing? It seems like he is just trying to pull out every stop to defend his client, the president, but is he putting himself in big peril here?
He is defending his client, Donald Trump. And Donald Trump happens to be president, but the actions that he takes as counsel for Donald Trump, he is seeking to say he's acting for the president, but he's acting for a human being. Of course he could be in trouble. First of all, he has Foreign Agent Registration Act problems, or he may.
Let's help understand what that means.
If he is getting paid by foreign actors to influence American policy, and he is going on TV or he is going into the cabinet meetings to influence policy, and it is not disclosed that he is being paid by another nation or someone outside the country, that is a problem. That may be unlawful. I don't know that he is. Let me be clear. I haven't looked at any books of account. I don't know. But I'm just, when The question is asked, could he be in trouble? Yes, clearly he could be in trouble, very serious trouble. And going back to the case involving the Turkish money dealer, that was a Southern District case. They were very, very much involved with that. Apparently, he signed on as one of the defense lawyers, and there was some great ambiguity at the time as to what it was he was doing as a defense lawyer. Then it turns out that there was a long delay in bringing an indictment against a Turkish bank. Got filed, I believe, yesterday. That, it looks to me as though the people in the Southern District who examined the evidence, examined the law, and sought to go forward, are perhaps unhappy with the fact that they have been impeded by a former prosecutor who was acting unlawfully. Getting their attention under those circumstances was unwise, and trying to stomp on them is seriously unwise. You have to be right on the facts or on the law or both. And if they are, you're in trouble, because he's basically declaring war on the work they're doing.
Right. Well, Catherine Smith, essentially what John is saying is don't miss with the Southern District, because certainly when he ran and when he was the U.S. Attorney here, he wouldn't have tolerated that.
That's a very fair takeaway. You don't mess with the Southern District. And these are very serious allegations, and we don't know what the evidence is going to bear out, but it can run the gamut from something to nothing, to ethical violations, to violations of very severe federal crimes. So I think we have to tune in and see what's yet to come.
And the fact that he is a lawyer for Donald Trump, for President Trump, does that allow him great latitude in acting this way?
I mean, there's some freedom that we get as attorneys to really advocate and represent our clients the best that we can. But at the same time, you're representing a person, you're representing also the institution of the presidency, and there's lots of things to think of behind that. You don't get carte blanche just to say whatever you want. There are ethical requirements you have to abide by, and there's legal requirements.
I just disagree that you're representing the institution. If you are representing Donald Trump, that's who you are representing. And when you are simultaneously representing Donald Trump and a prime target of a criminal investigation in the Southern District, you're representing them both and talking about the second one's case in the office of the first one. Yes, I mean, I have not sat down with the statute books, but you're talking about a whole lot. Without going far, it's a conspiracy to obstruct justice, as well as Farrah and so on. This is just not, it appears to be something that is most untoward for someone who's been in his position.
And finally, a quick question for you, John. We've got 30 seconds. Your former office, the district attorney's office here, is beginning to look at President Trump for a possible involvement. Is that likely to happen after? It wouldn't happen while he was president.
You say so, I don't.
It could happen.
Judge Marrero dealt with a motion to quash a subpoena, and the second half of his opinion, he went through the 3 memos, not cases, memos written by the Department of Justice saying that their chief executive could not be prosecuted. And he pointed out that they are inconsistent with the American Constitution.
All right.
The Constitution provides for immunity, it does, but only for congressmen under certain circumstances, not for the president under any circumstances.
All right. Well, John Moscow, Catherine Smith, thank you both for joining us. Very interesting. Up next, our shout out for the reporter who took on a popular sports organization, leading the way to what has become yet another shameful sex abuse scandal. As we've been reporting all year, there's a growing sex abuse scandal at yet another U.S. Olympic sport, USA Swimming. A major trial began this week in California over a lawsuit in which top officials, including its president Tim Hinchey, are being accused of a cover-up, which they deny. The trial has led to national attention, with articles now in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. But our shout-out tonight is for an encore for the reporter who has been on this story for years, doggedly pursuing the scandal of sexual abuse at USA Swimming, even as the organization and many of his newspaper's own readers said there was no scandal.
Orange County is kind of the epicenter of American swimming. So this was really in our backyard.
Scott Reed calls himself a sports investigative reporter.
And over the years, we've done a lot of investigative work on sexual abuse in USA Gymnastics. So this kind of blended into swimming.
And he quickly realized USA Swimming had a lot to hide.
It wasn't easy. It's a very closed network. It's a good old boys network. There's a handful of people that kind of run the sport, really powerful coaches. And if you want to move up in the sport, you don't want to cross.
But Reed took the time to listen to survivors, young women who had been abused, but who felt that USA Swimming was covering up what happened.
You ask these survivors about what happened to them, and you're really the first person to really give them an honest listen. And I think that was huge. I think that was a big part of our reporting.
But Reed's stories did not go over well with USA Swimming and local readers who were part of the swimming community.
A lot of pushback. Yeah, a lot of pushback, nasty emails, nasty calls.
Reed's most recent story involved allegations brought against swim coach Shawn Hutchinson.
He was a world championship team coach in 2009. He was on Olympic team coaching staffs, and he ran this high-profile Olympic prospect training group in Fullerton, California. And there was allegations that Hutchinson was physically involved with a swimmer he coached by the name of Ariana Kukers, who was the world champion and world record holder in the 200 IM.
During that decade, he stole many things from me, including my swimming career, my college experience, friendships, my virginity, and ultimately my Olympic dream.
USA Swimming investigated it. Eventually cleared him of any wrongdoing.
But documents Reed obtained told a much different story.
What these documents show is that the person that was hired to investigate this matter, a woman who was a 27-year veteran of the FBI, was told not to interview certain people, was not allowed to interview certain people. And so what we found was a deposition and some other documents from this investigator that proved that the finding of the investigation was just totally incorrect.
One more example of the power and importance of investigative journalism and staying on the story.
You can't let that dictate you. You have to do what's best for the reader, what's best for people you write about. A newspaper has a responsibility to its readers to sometimes tell them what they don't want to hear.
So another shutout tonight for Scott Reed and his editors at the Orange County Register, helping to lead the way in exposing years of sexual abuse at USA Swimming, telling readers, as he said, things they don't want to hear but need to hear. That's our program for tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week.